One of the most common problems that we hear is about speedometer cables and why my speedometer does not work. The first thing you want to do is check your speedometer to make sure that it does work. There's a little tab on the back here and you can spin it around and make the needle work. If that works, then you know the speedometer works. The next thing you want to do is make sure that your cable is not busted. There's a little keyway on the end that'll go into your speedometer. Now what happens on some cases with these new speedometer cables, when you put them in the end, it bottoms out on here, and when you tighten the cable, it binds it up. And then what happens is you go down the road a little bit and you bust the cable, almost instantly. So that's another thing you want to check, is to make sure that the speedometer cable, when it's attached in the transfer case, works. That it'll spin. Another thing that can happen to them is you could have a military transfer case and try to put a civilian speedometer cable in there, and they have a different end, and it will not work in a military transfer case with a civilian speedometer cable. So that's another thing to check. It has this big hump on the end. It's a way bigger, fatter cable, and what happens is it'll just spin in there. This is your civilian cable. It's a perfectly square end that'll go into your speedometer housing. And then here is your military style cable. Now this is the end that goes down in the transfer case. It's a round headed cable, and then it's got a keyway on the end to go into the speedometer gear. As you can see, the top here has a perfectly square head, so it will thread into the speedometer, but when you use the civilian cable, it will not work. It'll just spin because this is fatter down here. The other thing that can happen with these cables is that the inner cable, as you can see, you can pull the inner cable out, would be too short and won't stick in the speedometer and fall down in the transfer case a little bit. That'll happen if this part of the cable is too short, if you have maybe an older cable. The newer cables, there has never been any problems with them. There's multiple ways that you could check your speedometer cable to see if it's busted on the inside. One way is to physically take your inner cable out and make sure that it's not busted or frayed. The other way to do it is to keep the speedometer cable hooked to your transfer case and drive the Jeep down the road and hold this end and watch if it spins. If it does spin, then you know it does work. If it's not spinning and you pulled your cable apart, then there's something wrong with the gears in the transfer case. Easier ways to check it is to take your cordless drill and hook it up to your speedometer and your cable and run it. As you can see, it runs. When it's spinning, you'll be able to see that you have to run the drill in reverse for it to work properly. Another thing with these speedometers is the civilian ones, like the CJ models, they don't have an oiler in the back, but you can try an oil in the back, put like sewing machine oil in the back. Your later style speedometers have a little port in the back with a hole in it, and you just fill up the hole with sewing machine oil, and it'll keep everything nice and greased up that it will work properly. Speedometer here is your civilian speedometer, and we have these new. Fit 2A, CJ2A, CJ3A, and CJ3B up to 56. And then this is your later speedometer that would be in like your CJ5s and wagons and trucks, 1956 and up.
Just putting them up under the dash.